I first want to mention that it was supposed to be Columbia that was sitting in the moderator seat, and unfortunately the Columbia team was unable to come for reasons beyond their control. But I do want to thank them, and especially Matteo Varela, for having prepared the panel and also having done a huge amount of work on the toolkits on advocacy that we will be discussing today. So first, one word on advocacy itself, then I will introduce the panel, then they will give their interventions. My word on advocacy is one of the two most important things that the competition agencies do. Of course, enforcement being the other. Advocacy gives you the chance to step back, to scan the horizon, to see what are the restraints that keep the market from working for your people, even outside of the enforcement area. And so many of you agencies have done so much good on the advocacy side of the competition mandate. So in addition to scanning the horizon and finding restraints and helping tear them down through advocacy, you have a great mission in communication and education, because if the people of the country are not aware of your work, it takes the steam off your work. And on the other hand, when they are supporting you, it gives you great legitimacy to go further. And some of our panelists today will be talking about various efforts that they have done along both lines. So now let me introduce the panel members, and then we will go on to their interventions. We do have a terrific panel, and I'm very pleased to introduce them. All the way to my right is Andrea Marvan Saltiel, whom I had the pleasure to meet in Mexico 10 years ago, and so happy to see you as the chair of COFECE. So Andrea has been the general director of competition advocacy for Mexico, and before that she had various positions, including the executive director of the head of the investigating authority staff and other important positions, and is also a professor of economic competition and administrative law. And to my immediate right is Juan Manuel Contreras Delgado de Cos, who is acting advocacy director of the Spanish National Markets and Competition Authority and is head of public aid and draft regulation unit, and so is part of our wonderful host team that we are so grateful for today. And let me add on the host team that thank you, Connie, also, and your team for bringing us together in this wonderful, historic, memorable building and reminding us that the network always draws from the past as well as vision for the future. And to my left, we have Jim Wook Chung, who is the present standing commissioner of the Korea Fair Trade Commission, and before that had various important positions in the KFTC, including Director General for Business Group Bureau, and was head of the Seoul Regional Office. And to my far left is Anne Riley, who was for many years the head of the Dutch Royal Shell's Global Antitrust Group, and is very well known as probably the dean of the compliance bar. She was at first a practicing attorney, and then at Shell, she was a member of Shell's Group Ethics and Compliance Officer Leadership Team. She's co-chair of the International Chamber of Commerce and has many accolades granted to her. So I am going to begin with you, Andrea, and a word about the toolkits, just before you go on. The toolkits of the Advocacy Working Group were first put out to you in 2011, and had first asked for submissions from the agencies, and after the submissions had organized the toolkit in 4 areas. Areas of, a lot of what we will do today is areas of special projects that have been undertaken, that have succeeded, and where our agency contributors have shown the tools used at the various stages. So the stages in the first toolkit are identifying the issues, like what advocacy issues do you select. The second is who are the key stakeholders, and engaging with them and advice on how to engage. The third is implementation and monitoring of advocacy activity. And the fourth is evaluating effectiveness. And then there was the second toolkit. At first, the second toolkit was almost entirely devoted to communication with, for example, the rest of the world to know what you are doing to media, for example. It's been expanded after a call for submissions to all of you. And the second toolkit now has these 3 components: harnessing media resources, second, design and implementation of competition compliance strategies, and the third is research and consultation. And our people on the platform today each fit into one of those 3. So now to start with you, Andrea. So Andrea's contribution, Mexico's contribution, is on harnessing media resources. And we note that you've undertaken a really interesting initiative on annual communication strategy and an e-learning platform. We'd love to have you tell us about that. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the CNMC for this wonderful event and the ICN that they have put in together. It's a pleasure to be here. For COFECE, as Professor Fox has mentioned, advocacy is a key element or a tool that we use apart from enforcement. And we try to have a comprehensive approach on advocacy in order to target different publics, the public sector, the private sector, and the academic sector. However, today, as Eleanor has mentioned, I will focus on two strategies. The first is the social communication strategy. We issue an annual social communication strategy and program, which each year determines where we will direct our efforts and activities, which are conducted by the General Directorate for Social Communication and also the area in charge of advocacy. This strategy is designed bearing in mind the different audiences which we have to target and how to translate the benefits of competition policy. This strategy, and I think a key point to mention regarding social communication, is that this strategy has to be revised and reviewed continuously because our audiences change, our priorities change, and their perspective can also change. For example, in 2018, we conducted a study in order to, or as an effort to have better communication materials and promoting the principles of competition policy, we conducted this study. And according to the findings in that study, we reshaped our communication strategy. Today, or this year, we are rethinking and overlooking our communication strategy in order, and I would say with 2 main focuses. First, we have realized that we need to send messages that are not as competition authorities tend to be very technical and speak our own language, but not everyone understands that language, which is very complex. So as part of our competition, as our communication strategy, we are working on simplified languages to our official statements and strategic messages in order for the general public to comprehend easily what are the benefits of competition policy and how are they harmed when an anti-competition breach is conducted. And then also possibly next year, we are going to be assessing a more aggressive and proactive social media campaign. This is a big challenge because we have to tackle different types of social media, but if we want to get to the general public and especially speak to young populations, we have to get into social media and TikToks. And we have been learning from other agencies in Mexico how successful these campaigns have been. And then on the second point regarding our e-platform, e-learning platform, we designed an e-platform for internal capacity building within COFECE. But then we realized that we could use this platform and launch trainings outside for people outside of COFECE. And so since then, we have developed 7 courses in different topics. The courses are either targeted to regulators, and public procurers, and also targeted to the general public. So right now we have courses such as the rights and obligations in economic competition, which is a very basic course talking about what are the main obligations and what are the rights that economic agents have. Generally, also we have a course in competition policy in Mexico, what are our tools and how we can use them. We also have a tool targeted in order to simplify and target the issues related to digital economy. We also have a course regarding merger review, how we do our merger review, how does our process works, etc. And then aimed at regulators, we have a course in how to assess regulation from a competition perspective and how to design pro-competitive tenders and detect collusion. The advantage of these courses is that they are online in our platform. People can take them at any time of the day, wherever they are. They're very short, they're basic courses, so it takes about 3 hours to complete them. But at the end of the course, they get a certificate recognizing that they have completed the effort. So far, more than 5,000 people have taken it, and we have a 90% of general satisfaction with the course. So we have found it to be an interesting advocacy tool, which we will continue to use. Thank you. I hope I didn't pass my time, because I know we're running late.
So very interesting the way you are actually using the digital economy to great good, and that's terrific. Okay, so second we are going to hear from Juan Manuel. And Juan Manuel, you have attracted our attention with your contribution to the research and consultation aspect of the toolkit. And we know you have been doing really interesting internship programs for PhD students, the team, the host team, which we are very grateful for. And in addition, public consultations is part of the drafting process, but very important, and we'd love you to tell us about that and any challenges helpful to other agencies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eleanor. And for me, it's an honor. I am very honored. I'm very pleased to be here and to be a member of this such a distinguished panel. Let me say at the beginning as well that congratulations to the ICN because of the toolkit. It has been a hard work, I know it, and it will be very helpful, not only for agencies, it will be very helpful as well for public administrations, because sometimes they don't know exactly what we think about competition when we make reports or when we send some recommendations. So it will be very helpful, I'm sure, absolutely. I would like to say as well, and I am very lucky because the Spanish Competition Authority, not only the CNMC, I must say it, even its predecessors, were fully committed with the idea of competition advocacy. And I know that this is not perhaps a general rule in terms of the universe of agencies, but for us it has been very important since the beginning. I must say that, for example, for what just putting a date, since 2007, when the new law, the competition law was passed, it was clearly a border, a frontier for improving in our aspects in terms of advocacy. But just going to the point, because I know we are short of time, I will comment just a few words about the PhD student program. I don't know if you agree with this problem I'm going to put on the table, but we find difficult to find people to join the CNMC with some specialization in competition. And we thought that perhaps the problem was in the CNMC, but perhaps the problem was in the university, because usually they are coming from the university. And we realized that the university program usually don't have reference to competition. I remember when I was a student, I was studying law 20 years ago, there was nothing related to competition in my curriculum. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm sure it has improved, and probably there will be more seminars, webinars, or whatever. But even now, there is no a great solution for that problem. So we thought perhaps a solution would be to put on the table some kind of incentives, some kind of grants, just to promote the possibility of PhD students to have better knowledge about competition. So the program was launched last year. We have had just around 11 students who have finished his thesis on competition, on regulation, on competition advocacy in general. I mean, it's quite open about the topics. And there are 3 more waiting for enroll in the project. So apart from this action, I would like, a last mention as well, and it is in Spanish terms quite well paid. So approximately the compensation, the economic compensation is very similar to the minimum wage here in Spain. So having in mind that this is not a labor relationship is quite interesting for many students who are in the university. And apart from that action, I would like to mention the second one, would be the use of public consultations in our actions, on advocacy actions. Of course, as Andrea mentioned as well, there is a very relevant, important message about communication. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to monitor, you have to adapt, you have to modulate your message depending on the audience. When you want to reach the public audience, the public general, perhaps the message is very different. But we thought it was a very good thing to have the possibility, not only using perhaps the market inquiries, which are a quite formal instrument of going to answer about legal questions, but to have the opportunity as well for many people, not only competitors, not only people related to the competition issues, to have the opportunity to give opinion about sometimes for regulation, sometimes questions that are affecting some sectors. And we use this instrument, public consultation, in many different sectors. Right? We have been using in public procurement studies, for example, or in bus transport, or in any kind of sector. We have around 8 or 9 public consultations. Last week, specifically, we use it for a new public consultation on the barriers that the small and medium enterprises have for competing in public tenders, for example. No? It's a good idea to know what they have to say about that. Apart from that, I would like to mention as well that the main goals of this action will be, I would like to remark 3 points. The first one, it permits to identify key actors in the market. For example, in a study related to online advertising, we could identify 8 types of actors in the market, which perhaps it was impossible to detect without this instrument. And apart from that, you can identify barriers in the market, potential barriers. Obviously, they are barriers that perhaps they are justified, but we know the information is very relevant to decide if the barriers are really justified or not. Apart from that, it's a wonderful excuse for communicating as well, as Andrea mentioned as well, for communicating your new actions on competition, advocacy competition, or whatever. So, nothing more. Perhaps there is time later on for a debate about the Toolkit, and I will be very pleased to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And very important initiatives both. I want to just make one small comment congratulating you on the project with the PhD students working with the universities, and to stress how important that is to have contacts with the universities that feed in mutually, mutual relationship. You learn from them, you prepare students who might want to go into your agencies, and the idea of PhD students working is a great one. So let me turn now to Jin Woo, and we noticed in terms of compliance strategies that you had a very interesting and unusual idea, and we let you tell us about your project on compliance.
I'm very pleased to address you about the KFTC's compliance program and advocacy activities at this meaningful occasion. As the moderator mentioned, the KFTC briefly introduced its CP ratings in the Advocacy Toolkit Part 2. Today, I would like to explain the CP grading system in detail and share some improvements of related laws and policies. The grading system has been implemented since 2006 to make CPs more effective, and a total of 479 businesses have participated up to date. Businesses that adopt ACP can apply for the grading system, and the KFTC provides incentives to applicants after evaluating their level of performance. The CP grading system follows 4 steps. Number 1, evaluation of compliance default. Number 2, on-site evaluation. Number 3, analysis of the evaluation results. And number 4, confirmation for grade. More specifically, 8 factors are comprehensively considered in assessment, including a CEO's will to comply and company's internal monitoring program. Then, 6 grades are given, which are AAA for best, AA for good, A for above average, B for average, C for below average, and D for poor. For those who receive the top 3 grades, different levels of incentives are given, depending on their grade, such as an exemption from an official investigation and chairperson commendation. And in June, the Monopoly Regulation and Fair Trade Act, Korean Competition Act, was revised to define a compliance program and to provide legal ground for the KFTC's CP evaluation and incentives. To be more specific, it was stated the purpose of compliance program is to enhance businesses' voluntary compliance with laws and regulations governed by the KFTC. The revision also explains the KFTC's CP performance assessment and incentives depending on the performance level, such as penalty relief. We are going to make the incentive-related subordinate statute more detailed before the revision takes effect in June next year. Also, we'll develop various incentives through consultations with relevant ministries that can offer practical support to businesses. Thanks to the effort from the private sector and the KFTC's grading system, now CP has become an integral part of businesses' internal monitoring. Next, I'd like to talk about KFTC's competition assessment. The KFTC has implemented competition assessment since 2009. When a new legislation is introduced or existing one is strengthened, we analyze its potential impact on market competition. Through the assessment, we can seek alternative measures to achieve legislative goals while minimizing negative impact. And this is part of our regulatory impact analysis, which use objective and scientific methods to assess the need for new or tightened regulations and to review their appropriateness beforehand. To improve such assessment capabilities, the KFTC carried out competition assessment capacity building project this year. We conducted an in-depth analysis of regulations for highly specialized and technical areas which have been adapted to respond to new and emerging industries. In particular, we commissioned the Korea Fair Trade Mediation Agency, a specialized research institute, to work on the in-depth analysis of major regulations, then restrict the market entry of business or their capability to compete. And through the project, we were able to enhance our expertise and effectiveness in terms of competition assessment. Specifically, since the project began, we have reviewed 395 regulations of other ministries and provided 12 opinions, all of which are reflected. The KFTC believes companies' voluntary compliance is as significant as law enforcement in establishing fair market practices. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much, and I hope everyone is striving to get the AAA and increasing deterrence. Unfortunately, we never know how much is deterred, and hope that it is very effective. And so, Anne, we are going to ask you now to comment, and being a real expert in compliance, you may have some comments on the KFTC project, as well as any other comments you have regarding the toolkit, either praising, criticizing what you have.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank the ICN for inviting me. I'd like to thank Canny and her team for this beautiful venue and wonderfully organised conference. And last but not least, I'd like to thank DG Comp for appointing me as an NGA. So, and also Matteo for his marvellous help in organising the panel. Matteo tells me that part 2 of the toolkit, which the AWG has been working on very diligently, and which we've been discussing in Rethinking the Toolkit, will be published after this conference. And so my urging to the ICN is that it's published as soon as possible so that everyone can benefit from it. The aim of the toolkit is to provide practical tools for effective advocacy. And to this end, the toolkits, both part 1 and part 2, provide very interesting examples of agency advocacy. Now, I emphasise examples. That is not a criticism, because those examples are really interesting and useful. But I do have some ideas from an NGA perspective, and I do emphasise this as an NGA perspective. The toolkit provides examples, and whilst the toolkit introduction says that it's best practices, they're not really articulated as best practices, but as examples. And my suggestion for rethinking the toolkit is that we actually pull out some best practices. You can include the other examples by all means, but I think it would be very useful to have some selected best practices. I think this may already be happening, but it would be good to develop tools to assess whether the advocacy efforts that we see in the examples are actually working in practice, to test whether businesses actually understand competition law. So what business calls KPIs, or key performance indicators, does it work in practice? So kick the tires and see if the car moves. This could be done by way of surveys, such as in Mexico, or such as the survey that the CMA did a couple of years ago, where it actually asked business, what do you understand about competition law? And many of you will have seen the CMA survey, but the results were appalling. most businesses, apart from big business, do not understand competition law at all. In fact, there's an apocryphal story in the UK that people think competition law is about betting and gaming. So, you know, draw from that what you will. So I think the AWG also needs to advocate, not just through the competition authorities, but through the ICN to the public at large. So make the ICN work known better outside the ICN and its members. Some small, but I think maybe useful comments, which, and briefly, because I know we're running out of time, but they're practical, so I hope they're useful. For the examples in the toolkit, some agencies put the dates of when they did the particular exercise. Some agencies do not, in fact most do not. And I think it would be useful for everyone to have the date of when the exercise was done so that you can see whether it's still valid, or for you as agencies to see whether you should be updating it. Also, I think it would be really useful to have hyperlinks. Some agencies do put hyperlinks in the examples of tools that they've used. If you haven't got hyperlinks in your examples, I would recommend it. And a really good example of where hyperlinks are great is in the Swedish example in Toolkit Part 1. I think it's at page 12, but don't quote me. I think it would also be useful to have perhaps end user reviews of how well you think the toolkit is doing. End user, I mean, you could start with the NGAs and say, what do you think? And I know there are NGAs such as myself on the AWG, but perhaps a wider outreach to NGAs might be good. And other organisations such as the ICC, the IBA and ABA. I'm going to stop at that because if you want me to make any further comments, I can do it afterwards.
So thank you. Great advice, and we recommend that the Advocacy Working Group consider all advice for the next project that will happen, because this is a multi-year project, and if all of you have suggestions, you should pass it on to the Advocacy Working Group. Maybe we have time or not to come back to some of your suggestions, because we only have 16 minutes now, which means that in this next phase, one of the things we're doing in this program is actually, it's an idea session to tell you many wonderful projects that have been undertaken, and therefore we're using this question period for probing you on some more projects that you have on the burner. And we have to try to limit your remarks now for like 2 minutes, and I'm going to go through the same line and ask Andrea again that we know you're doing some interesting work with states of Mexico, and tell us what that is.
Yes, thank you. So one of the challenges that we have faced, and we are trying to work on it, is to bring competition, or to have competition part of the public agenda. And that has been a challenge not only on the federal level, but especially in Mexico from the state level. We are a federation. And so a couple of months ago, we launched an initiative which is specially focused and aimed at working with state governments, local governments, in order for them to internalize the importance of competition and to provide a work agenda designed specifically to the needs of each state. So far, I would say our strategy has been very successful, because we've only launched it a couple of months ago, and now we have signed 3 cooperation agreements with state governments, and are designing, as I mentioned, an agenda which is attending each state's need. But they're very much focused on assessing regulation and helping them review some of the regulation in order to ensure that the regulation is pro-competitive. Providing trainings to public procurement officials and reviewing also their procurement laws and regulation. And then on a second aspect, not related to public but to the private sector, is through the states start conversations and dialogues with chamber associations, industrial associations, and with the private sector in order to provide trainings and have them comprehend their obligation to comply with the competition law, and then also their rights, how to identify when they are being affected by a breach of competition law, and how to approach COFECE. And then on the third point, or a third part of this strategy, is aimed at the academic sector. So through the states, we are speaking with public universities in order to ensure that competition is a topic that is addressed in law school, economic schools, business schools, even in graduate degrees. And we're very happy with this approach. For example, in one of the states, which is Jalisco, the public university, which is the second largest university in Mexico, is very interested and in working with us, and we are designing a strategy to create a first competition clinic where the students are going to be able to review competition issues and then maybe select some subjects so that they can file complaints before COFECE, etc.
Thank you.
You're
Over to you, Juan Manuel. I wanted to ask you about, you've done work on evaluating the impact of competition advocacy in Spain. Can you sum it up in a minute and a half, maybe?
Yes, 1 minute. Just 1 minute to. Yes, it was another project because the importance of evaluating your work, I don't have the need to explain it. It's very important for us to know if our recommendations are helpful or not. So we decided to evaluate if around 500 reports done from 2013 to 2019 were helpful or not. And so the idea was just evaluating if the recommendations were followed. If I will have to bet before knowing the study, for example, a rate of compliance of our recommendation, perhaps with a 20 or 30%, I will be very happy. Perhaps I'm affected because my children never follow my recommendation. But in this case, surprisingly, it was around 60%. So the rate was quite impressive for our work. Apart from that, we tried as well in this report to put on the table to make public how much money they could save if they follow our recommendation. I mean, the public administration. And the amount was quite impressive as well. But these two goals were the main messages of the study, and it's published, so I invite you to consult it if you are interested in it. With that is said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jin Wu, you have other very intriguing projects, including going out into drama, it seems to me. Would you say a word about your program about web drama?
Since 2022, the KFDC has been producing a YouTube web series titled The Unfair, uploaded on its own YouTube channel, 공다방. The story is about the KFDC investigating and sanctioning unfair business practices, such as undisclosed paid ads on social media and price fixing. So far, Season 1 and Season 2 came out with a total of 10 episodes. The web series will also be turned in a feature film and be streamed on domestic IPTV and OTT platforms for free. Through the content, we are able to explain the KFDC's role and missions to the public in a more easier way. And it's been well received, hitting 400,000 views.
Thank you. Now, 1 minute. I asked the panelists, I told the panelists if there was a minute or two at the end to each sum up or give you advice or what they like. And if I may, I'm going to ask you to combine this intervention with your last idea.
This is my last idea.
Okay, that's great. I'll ask you that, and then I'll go through the other three. Thank you.
Okay, very briefly, because I know we're running out of time. When part 2 of the toolkit is published, which will hopefully be very soon after this conference, a posting facility will be put on the ICN website, which will enable ICN members and NGAs, which I think is great, to post notes, articles, statements on competition advocacy for wider discussion between the ICN members and NGAs and the public. I think that's really excellent, and I look forward to that very much. But I want to say that to be effective, a tool has to be known about. And so not a lot of people outside this community, and maybe your governments that you report to, know about the ICN. So I think the ICN could actually do some advocacy on its own behalf, actually. And that's all I have to say.
I think something we can all get on board with, that everyone should know about the ICN, and it should be interactive with the public. So last comment, a minute or minute and a half for what you'd like for your sum up.
Thank you. I think I would like to close with some of the challenges that I see ahead in advocacy. I think one challenge or an interesting point is how to coordinate enforcement actions and advocacy actions. I think that is a constant challenge that we have to be looking. Then I would say a second challenge is how to implement or do ex-post assessment of advocacy actions. We, as other agencies, we issue regulatory opinions and we can conduct market studies, but they usually contain recommendations that are not compulsory to the regulators. So I think it's also our job to communicate why those recommendations are key, and to impulse or not push, but more work and cooperate with the regulators in order to help them understand that and to implement the regulation, the recommendations. And then I would say, lastly, I think compliance and the use of compliance programs is also one of the main challenges that we should look ahead, and it's a very useful tool in order to have knowledge of the competition law and their obligations.
Just a few words to say that I'm perhaps to put a little of homework for next year. And I think the toolkit is very helpful for identifying restriction, for example, and knowing what action you can do in order to identify any kind of barriers to regulation, for example. But perhaps it would be very interesting as well to fight a new battle, the battle of justification. I mean, usually this restriction can be justified. And in that dialogue with the public administration, sometimes we realize in our report that perhaps this restriction can be justified. But what kind of reason, what kind of principles you can use, and the public administration can use just to convince you that perhaps the regulation is well-made, it will be very interesting, perhaps some kind of best practices or something like that, in order to put in the toolkit, because you know it is a wonderful work, but it hasn't finished. Rethinking, we are always rethinking and new develops about that. Thank you.
And Jim, look, your comments.
KFTC will continue our effort to promote compliance programs, import the expertise and effectiveness of competition assessment, and in turn, safeguard fair competition in the market.
Thank you. So it seems that I squeezed you more than I had to. If I did you have a so let me say, as one final comment, because there's no end to this really. As you know, the first toolkit was 2011. The advocacy working group took a look at it and said, that's not good enough, we have to bring it up to date. And now the toolkit is updated to 2023, but we won't be in 2023 forever. And as Andreas Munt advised us in his opening comments, which I thought were very inspiring, we have to look at the future and changes in the markets are changing, and what we do has to be compatible and even inspired by what is happening in the market. one of the big reasons for the need for the re-examination of part 2 of the toolkit was that the part about interactions with the media was really out of date because of the digital economy. And as several of you have just said, the need for looking ahead and making the advocacy efforts compatible and inspired by and looking ahead to tomorrow is a really important need to be fulfilled. So I think going back to your suggestions, Anne, and you kind of endorsed maybe best practices, I think that's one that would be great to get behind, because I think the toolkit could have like one more leg, which is drawing from all of these great examples and drawing best principles as well as the stories. It's really wonderful to read the stories of the toolkit, and they probably will inspire you to say, oh yes, I would like to do that or that. And it would be even, and the toolkit also adds some advice as to tools, but being boosted a little by drawing the best practices would be a great idea. And of course it is true, and I'm coming to the very next breakout session because I want to say a word about the breakout session that will be here now in a few minutes, and I'm going to invite you, Andreas Munn, to the platform in a minute for the next breakout session. Breakout sessions follow. One of them will be in this room, and one of them will be on the advocacy contest that the World Bank and ICN hold every year. And the contest is always designed by various themes that the countries and many of you have, and you have responded to in giving, it's really your success stories. And there are wonderful success stories, which are great ideas, just like the ideas on the platform, and a certain number of winners. So the winners of the ICN World Bank advocacy contest will be announced shortly in this room at the breakout session. And it is the end of this session, and I thank our participants very much for very interesting interventions. Thank you, and thank you all for being here.